And we're live. What's up, everybody? This is your boy Black Magus. I said it for you, by the way.
I feel special.
Yeah. With my boy Cardiac Sumo. Say what's up to the people.
What's up, people?
And this is the reason Reborn. You can thank my partner for the title. Just briefly explain to the people why we call it the reason Reborn.
Shit, put me on the spot.
Yeah, well, you're a rookie. I have to train you up.
Throw me the deep end there. All right. Well, essentially, in public discourse, there's a lot of, or I should say, a lack of discussion, a lack of a reason, just a lot of kicking and screaming, people just kind of isolating themselves off. So we figured it'd be nice to start bringing up these conversations again, having them really. I don't know about you, but I certainly haven't been talking that much about this type of political stuff with anybody. It's a very hard set of topics to touch.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to get people engaged. I know for me, when having these discussions, I tend to tap out because of the people around me. Unfortunately, sometimes I get into conversations with people who aren't really that invested in politics. They know who certain figures are. They know certain buzz terms like Obamacare, which, I'm with my homegirl Katina. It's not Obamacare. They just call it that because they want you to hate it. It's the Affordable Care Act, people. Call it by its real name. But stuff like that. You get a lot of people who just buy into the jargon and take things, that they hear one place, but they don't actually listen to both sides of the conversation and try to come up with their own opinion. So I tend to get a lot of just people following the line, and it just pisses me off. So I try to avoid it. But like you, I think it's something that we need to do. We need to talk more. Even God help me if I have to talk to the people who are just so fucking stupid and know that I'm gonna curse a lot of people. Kodak knows me, rage.
I wasn't sure if profanity was cool, but now.
Oh no, profanity is much cool. It's therapeutic. I keep telling you, it's good for the soul to curse.
Yes. I would definitely agree. I would say for like the last maybe 6 months or so. Prior to that, I was really, engaged online, talking to people about different social situations, politics and whatnot. And after a while, you just get really beat down. A lot of people, it's like they don't want to talk so much as they want to fight, and they don't really want to fight so much as they just want to regurgitate whatever jargon that they've already heard somewhere else and either agree with the people that they agree with or just throw it at the people they don't agree with. It's not really a discussion so much as a yelling contest most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty sad. So we're trying to hopefully give you guys some information and just different thoughts, different opinions, because it's not like we're going to sit here and agree all the time. We don't agree on everything.
I mean, we could if you just accept me being right. Be pretty simple.
See, this is why we may seem like we're going to fight, but we're not fighting. He's just being an asshole. That's all. just know that. But no, seriously. Hopefully, this will get people to be more interested and engaged in the conversation. And, we're not the end all be all geniuses of the political landscape, but none of us don't have to be to have this discussion. Just listen, read, ask questions, things like that. By the way, if you do want to send questions, we do have an email address, wiseguyGFE@gmail.com. So if you have any questions, suggestions, please feel free to send it there. We appreciate any feedback we can get.
Right.
So let's move on to our first topic, and this is where the yelling begins. So first big story politically this week, Donald Trump has been under fire for the way that he engages with the fallen soldiers of the family of fallen soldiers, I should say. In particular, his lack of, I guess, empathy and sympathy that he has shown.
So lack of emotional intelligence there, yeah.
Yeah. long story short, the widow of a soldier who was killed in an ambush in Niger, he didn't give a call, and people went ballistic. Now, for me, it wasn't that big of a deal that he didn't make the call. I mean, knowing who we have in office, that was kind of like, well, what do you expect type of thing. No big deal. But once the media got a hold of it and made it a big deal, up steps someone who really doesn't understand that if you just keep your mouth quiet sometimes, you don't have to worry about these things. But our president, being who he is, decides to fight back and decides to call the widow and showed what many of us think is a lack of heart when he called, saying that, he knew what he signed up for. But, and it's sad that he had to go that way. That's what he told the widow. And the news got out because a congresswoman, Frederica Wilson, was actually there with the family. A little background for people who don't know why she was there. She's actually a close personal friend of the family. She runs a program she ran a program in that district that helped, kids who were in bad situations, mostly minority kids, be able to be a part of this program and, get out of the trouble that they were in and hopefully develop into, like this gentleman who just died, decent, upstanding, hardworking young men and women. And he was one of the kids in that program, grew up around her. She's known him for most of his life before he died. So she has a personal connection to them. So that is why she would be in the presence of the family at the time when that call happened. And of course, now you have the back and forth discourse about whether or not Trump was right for what he said, how he reacted. Was it the right thing to do? Should he have been, be able to handle it more? And of course, this brought out a whole bunch of other stories about how he offered one family $25,000, never came through. Immediately, once that story came out, he cut the check. And it's just all types of craziness around that. What do you think of this situation when it comes to his response to the tragedy of the young man dying in an ambush, and just in general, dealing with families of fallen soldiers?
So I want to table that 25 grand there for a second. That's an interesting point unto itself. As far as this woman here, it seems as though, as many people organize that article that you said argues as well, in his defense, and to be charitable, you could say, he was just regurgitating something he heard from somebody else, I think from Kelly, about, him essentially knowing what he was getting into, but wanting to do it anyway, being very honorable, so on and so forth. You could very charitably give him the benefit of the doubt that he was trying to be empathetic and just didn't have the right wording. Major issue there, to me, seems to be that instead of just admitting that maybe he didn't have the best wording or accepting responsibility for poor wording, he immediately had to go and lash out at the widow and Miss Wilson, I believe you said. He has extreme difficulty taking responsibility for anything he says. If he's ever criticized, it's never any admission of guilt or incorrectness. It's always an attack on someone else or a misdirection. So if he feels like he's getting criticized for not calling the families of fallen soldiers, well, the Obamas didn't do it, or previous presidents didn't do it, which untrue, but it's always his first instinct is to either attack whoever's attacking him or to throw it somewhere else. He never really takes any responsibility for anything he says or fails to do.
And this is what worries me about it. It's like his response is always that of an 8-year-old. It just like he needs someone to teach him etiquette lessons, learn some tact. I mean, this would not have been the story if he would have honestly not said anything at all. I would have rather him not say anything and let the media just go on about, hey, he's just not saying anything, They would have talked about it for a while, but without him giving feedback, a soundbite for them to even further take it, it would have dissipated. And it's more to the point. It's like exactly what you said. All he had to say was, I didn't mean it to come out that way. I was not trying to be that way. I apologize. And then everybody would leave him alone. You know what I mean? But he just doesn't know. Instead of, it's not even owning up. He didn't have to be, sincere about it, because I doubt he would have been sincere had he done it. Just do the right thing and let things move on. If you want people to take you more serious, you let certain things go and concentrate on the other things. Yet here we are, a week and a half, and he's still picking at this lady. Well, and he's picking at the widow. It's like, seriously.
And this isn't the first time this is common behavior with him, but we shouldn't be surprised that he's not letting this go. I mean, I don't know if you check out his Twitter. I have a fun little game where I just kind of randomly go to his Twitter and, just see what the latest thing was and see if it was completely nuts, and it usually is. And it was a few days ago, I believe, he was mentioning Hillary again. He cannot seem to let go of this whole she won the popular vote thing. So I'm not at all shocked that he can't let this go with this widow, because he's still going after Hillary for an election that happened.
And I don't understand. It's like Hillary's out of the picture. Hillary's, no offense, Hillary, but you're pretty much inconsequential to the equation of things right now. The losers tend not to be that important, although I guess he decided maybe she needs to be that important. She would go. That's the thing. It's like, if he's mad at her for coming out and saying something, you know what? You keep bringing her name up. You keep making her relevant. She would be irrelevant if you would just stop talking about her. You don't have to mention her. Nobody's really thinking about Hillary until you start talking shit, dude.
The same thing that motivates him to go after this widow is the same thing that motivates him to go after Hillary. Is the same thing that motivates him to respond to any sort of criticism. He cannot handle even the slightest of blows to his ego, and he feels the need to address every single one of them, usually in a childish manner. Always in a childish manner, I guess. I can't think of a particular instance where he did it in a mature way, but it is not in his nature to not address these things. He's like you said, like an 8-year-old. He can't take the smallest of slights to his character or whatever he feels like he's going on. He has a very unhealthy sense of ego, and he's constantly on guard for it.
I honestly don't think it's necessarily ego. I think he has like some type of excessive acceptance issues or something. Like someone didn't love him enough growing up. And I really feel like he needs, like, because you know how he is when something seems to go right. He's all out front, like, I did this. This is me. I did it. Congratulate me. It's like, dude, no, you actually didn't, which we'll get to a little later. But it's a ridiculous situation that should have been a non-situation.
I'm sure his aides and others in the White House must love every day with this guy, like, non-issues turning into explosive issues for no apparent reason. Must be a fun day.
Yeah. All right, so the next topic, which rolls into what we were just talking about, John Kelly, the White House chief of staff, decided to defend Trump. I guess he decided, I'm tired of just babysitting this guy. I'm just going to go out and, stand up for my president. I know I just work for him and all that, but I could show him some love. I could stand up for him. So he did that, and he made a complete mess of the whole situation. So when he went into the defense, he attacked Senator Wilson, saying she should be ashamed of herself for doing such things, and he made some comments about what she was saying during I believe it was like a dinner to honor law enforcement in Florida, and how she was like taking credit for raising the money to, build the memorial that they were honoring and all of this and everything like that. Well, clearly spending time around Trump has made someone who a lot of people in Washington truly respect look like an idiot. A lot of people always say like he's the guy who's going to make things calm. He's going to right the ship. He's going to, keep Trump in check. And here he is acting just like Trump.
Can I just say this, how dismaying it is that we have to talk about babysitting and keeping the president of the country I mean, why do we have to talk about our president like he's a fucking 5-year-old? This is like, it's weird how normal this kind of conversation has become, where we're talking about keeping the president under control.
Yeah, it's something that we've never had to discuss. I can't think of in any history book that I've read or any documentary that I've seen about any of the president. I can't recall ever a time where people thought that Teddy Roosevelt was a wild man, and he really was. I mean, he would walk around and give speeches with a book in his hand where somebody tried to assassinate him, and he would always bring that up. He was a Rough Rider. He liked hunting. He loved guns. He was pretty kind of an abrasive person, but nobody feared what he would do. He talked like, rough, but he had sense. It's like now, I can't think of anybody who we've been sitting like, gosh, we need to get him out the office because he may cause the end of the world, or he may cause World War III, or I've never heard that conversation. If anybody, please let me know. Has there ever been a president who's been viewed this way?
No, it's just how normal the conversation's becoming. Like, I said the same thing the other day, and I'm just thinking, like, when is it that I started to look at the president as a child and just be okay with talking about him like that? Like, that's just how we've always talked about presidents.
Yeah, no, I mean, even, George Bush Jr., as much as people joked about how dumb he was, the man understood his role, and he wasn't the brightest light bulb in the box, but he functioned. He functioned like a light bulb. He at least did his basic damn job. I really don't get this. And it's like now he's becoming a hero. That's the weird thing. Bush is becoming a hero figure now.
Yeah.
He's gone from being the biggest GOAT to just, we love you, George. I honestly would take another 4 years of him.
Every time I see him, I'm like, man, this guy's just so adorable. Like, I don't remember ever thinking he was like a moron or something. He's just the sweet old guy who's one of the presidents all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's insane. But back to John Kelly, which, by the way, be proud of me for getting his name right, because for the longest I've been calling him Robert Kelly, and I couldn't think of why I keep confusing him and calling him Robert Kelly. You know what it is? That's the name of the senator who helps start the Sentinel program in the X-Men.
No shit.
I was like, okay, that's the guy who was lobbying for the mutant law acts and all that. Like, wow, am I that much of a nerd that I just keep calling this guy?
The sad thing, I was thinking it sounded familiar, but I was trying to think of like a real world thing that could have been.
Yeah, no, X-Men. So, but yeah, it's kind of a shame because this guy, again, he gets so much respect from both sides of the political arena, and you already had the thing with the fallen soldiers, his son being a fallen soldier. You would have thought he would have had. I mean, I wasn't going to expect him to come out and be like he was just totally wrong for what he did, but you expect him to be more, you know, less of an asshole, I guess, because he was being a really big asshole. He went on attack mode. He had no reason to be on attack mode. That lady did and said nothing to offend him. She only came at Trump. So it was a weird thing when I saw it. I was like, yes. When I first heard it, I thought people were lying, to be quite honest, because it made no sense. He had no reason. He wasn't under pressure. Maybe he felt pressure because people kept saying, it sucks because his son died, and you would think that he would have like warned Trump and told him better. I think I honestly swear to God, I think what he had was a parent moment. He's the parent of a horrible child, and he's been told every day, your child is horrible, is a little monster. And I think he just had a moment where he snapped because he you know how parents are, even if their children are, horrible, they're not going to say it. And they try to like be quiet and calm, but he just had his outburst moment. That's all. He's tired of taking, lumps for raising a little snot, I guess.
In his defense, if you want to defend Trump, you're going to have to resort to unusual tactics. I mean, the guy is a fucking maniac. I don't know what else he could have done. You can't defend anything he does in a rational way because nothing he does is particularly intelligent or rational. I'm not saying he should, go on the warpath, but we're seeing this over and over again with people in the White House around Trump. They end up having to go on attack mode or say ridiculous things or lie because they're trying to defend something that is not defendable. It's just, when you're dealing with the insane, you have to become insane, I suppose. This guy meaning Trump, just infects everyone around him with his stupidity. You cannot rationally defend anything he does. So I guess in Kelly's defense, going on attack mode is a little better than, well, no, I can't even defend it really. Just, I don't know how else you're supposed to deal with a situation like this.
Yeah, it's a very frustrating period because it's funny too. The one thing I could say that's been good about him is that it's starting slowly but surely to become less about party lines and more about, okay, we need to get this idiot out and then to figure out what we're going to do to fix things. I've never, again, I can't recall in anything. I mean, I've heard of divisive candidates. Andrew Jackson was one of the most divisive people because he came through with the spoil system. The victor goes the spoil. So he brought in all his friends. He kind of started that. If I win, I'm gonna put all my people on and run government that way. But say for a few racial incidents that you can't look past that he did. Trail of Tears, people, look it up. He's not the greatest person in the world, but he, for the most part, governed fairly. He was just a dick. People didn't like him, and that's fine. You could be an unlikable person. Woodrow Wilson was unlikable. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. People say they revered him. They did a poll back in his time. He was the least popular person in his family. That's including the dog. The dog had a higher approval rating than him. So it's like you don't have to be a lovable person. You just do your job, and that's the problem. He's just not doing his job. He's doing too much nonsense. And it's just speaking of nonsense that he does. So he came out earlier this week and announced that he will be releasing the JFK files. Now, to his credit, that's commendable. You're not going to hold them. You're not going to write up, an order to seal the files. But to make it clear, and this is where, this is another problem he has with actually being transparent and totally upfront. he didn't just order this out the blue. This has been mandated. This was something that was written, and I forgot all about it until he said something. I totally forgot about it. That they were going to allow the records to be unsealed after a certain date. And I guess this Thursday is that day.
26, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, these things become public record at that point. It was always going to happen. It wasn't like this was something new, but I give him this. He knows how to take credit for things that most people don't pay attention to because everybody was out there celebrating him. He's on Fox News, strutting his stuff and all that. And it's like, little do you know, this wasn't his order. This was something that the FBI and the government had put in motion a long time ago. They just left the like clause where, yeah, if like final say if the president wanted to put in, a referendum or something to keep them sealed, he could, but
so is there any motivation he would have to keep them sealed?
No, this is why this fascinates me though, and this thankfully gives me a chance to have a discussion that doesn't involve him for right now. It's fascinating to me that these things are going to come out of the catacombs of FBI's vault, and people will get to read them and see what's what, because the JFK assassination has been like one of the biggest conspiracy theories in the American government for, it's been well over 40 years, I think. Something around there. And, I'm sure you've seen some of the movies or you've heard about some of the conspiracy theories about how there couldn't have been just one shooter. There was 3 shooters and the shot came from the left, or no, it came from that angle. The way his head went back indicates that it went there. There's no way that Lee Harvey Oswald could have done it by himself. I mean, and it gets even weirder because if he did, I swear to God, if he didn't get killed by John Ruby, it wouldn't even probably had gotten as big a conspiracy as it did, I really can't wait to see this. I know me personally, is this anything that interests you?
I can't say I have much knowledge on it. For me, this just kind of came out of the blue, so I might be interested in looking into it, but I was not aware that this was on the horizon now.
Yeah, it just, for me personally, it's just a very, very fascinating thing because I want to see who's right, who's wrong, if it was this big deal. And honestly, even if it was a conspiracy, I truly don't think that the FBI is going to seal that big of a government secret, because how would that feel to have like them open up that file and say, yeah, we didn't like John F. Kennedy. We didn't agree with his political, position. So yeah, we conspired to kill him. The chances of that happen are next to none. That's why I want to see, because I want to see what is going to be and what's the next conspiracy theory is going to be, because it's not going to put to rest anything.
Yeah.
People who have been for years writing books on this and talking about this and trying to figure it out and figure out motives, and the only people who would know are pretty much now all dead. So it's going to become even more of a big folktale and all of that. I just think that when this comes out, it's going to be pretty crazy. I know I'm going to watch, because when they show it, I'll watch one of the specials, because every channel is going to try to do a special report type deal. I just want to see what happens when it comes out and read the article, because I really want to know. In fact, I'm almost willing to take a day off and go down to the Library of Congress just to see if I can view it in person, because I just want to know. Like, I just want them to open the books like he just got shot. People, calm down. And for all these conspiracy theories, people just be so disappointed.
Not really, because like you said, they'll keep going. It'll, if anything, the current media attention on it will just kind of bolster up the interest of the public in it again. So gets to be a shot in the arm for this shot of adrenaline there, people will be even more interested, even if there's no good information there.
Yeah. Hopefully, like I said, my excitement is going to be that it disappoints. I would love to see what the reaction is going to be when it disappoints people. Now, let's move on to the other topic. And I don't know if you noticed, but I've been sipping wine, bolstering my reserves for this. Okay. So we're going to talk about accountability. So as you can see from most of the topics that we discussed so far today, accountability has been kind of the thread through them all. Trump being accountable for the way he responds to the families of fallen soldiers, to the way John Kelly defended him on this issue, to even, you could say, Frederica Wilson, because when they called her out, she came and showed her accountability. She proved, that yes, she was with the family. Yes, she knew this guy. No, she didn't say the things that Kelly said about her. She took account for her actions, and that's saying something about her, whereas everybody else is coming at her and trying to damage control for Donald Trump. And pretty much since he's been in office, it's just been one big, huge damage control session. Let's be honest. It's not just that with the widow. It's what he said about, you could take it back to before he was president, about grabbing pussies and, things he said about Obama, just all types of things.
If Obama didn't want to be talked about, he should have been born in America. I'm just,
Yep, exactly.
How are you going to have a president born in Kenya? What the fuck?
Exactly. Oh my God, that's just. Hold on, let me sip another sip of wine.
Guess everybody's wondering. I just got water, people. So.
Yeah, I don't even drink wine, people. So this shows you.
I don't drink alcohol, so I didn't have the option.
Good for you, sir. Stay away from alcohol. It's the devil's ambrosia. It's so good. But yeah. So the question is, how accountable should not just Donald Trump, but all politicians be for things they say, actions that they take when they come to, I guess, when they're in a negative light, of course, because let's be honest, everybody, when you do something right, all of us, we're ready to raise our hand and say, look at me, I did good, but hardest thing seems to be when you're wrong, taking that responsibility. But of course, there's some cases where that responsibility may not necessarily be your burden. Just curious, how accountable and how responsible do you think our politicians should be given the roles that they're in?
I would say very much so. If I was to leave any space open for not being accountable, I guess you could argue that as a politician, you are required to moderate the way that you communicate with the public. I don't want to say, lie to them or anything like that, but they are very careful about the way they speak. It was probably one of Hillary's biggest downfalls. She was a little too careful about how she spoke, but in general, part of being a politician is to politic your way around certain things. So I might be willing to leave a little space open for being aware that you have to communicate with a public that has a wide set of viewpoints on many different subjects. But generally speaking, yes, I think politicians should be held accountable. And with the exception of Trump and, the current administration, I would say that they generally are, depending on, by the public in general, they are at least held to task for a lot of what they do.
Now, when we hold them to task, do you think that's right? I mean, of course, I think that's right. But do you think that we're always right when it comes to that? Because, again, like I was saying earlier with the whole thing with the soldier thing, me personally, it didn't really bother me that much until he escalated the situation. It was something that I could have been like, that's messed up, but that's him. He's just not a tactful person, and moved on. But now he escalated to the level that it got. But do you think there's instances where we kind of lash out and jump on politicians in a way that's not warranted?
Certainly. To your point, when we talk about holding people accountable, that means to the extent that they actually are accountable for something. We do have a bad tendency, and not just with politicians, but with celebrities in general, to over attack them for what would relatively trivial things. We string them up and hang them out to dry for things that aren't very important. And in Trump's case, he tends to make them more important. But I can imagine there would be many people out there who'd be freaking out about him, not having called or being lax in those duties. But to your point, I don't think it's the biggest deal on earth. It's not like he slit her throat or something crazy. And you could criticize his lack of attention to that, but not to the extent that, he's a terrible person, he's a monster, he's this and that. You have to be reasonable when you hold anybody accountable.
Yeah, and that's why I asked that question, because I don't know. Sometimes, because I even think this about myself. Sometimes I think that my first reaction sometimes is not the best reaction, because I don't know. Maybe it's because of all the accumulative things that he's done. It kind of, it's like I guess I'm probably kind of on edge, so to speak. Like, if something he does something, of course he did that, and then you go on the rant and rave and stuff like that, because I don't know. It's just weird for me. I try not to. I always try to, respond to something reasonable, but it's just weird. This is such a weird time, politically and socially. Period. With so much going on, like, is it overreacting about people who are fighting to have civil war monuments kept? Like, me personally, why are we celebrating that stuff? That's nobody else celebrates. One, nobody celebrates the losers of a conflict like that, and two, those are monuments to a time where people were trying to keep human beings enslaved. These people, you say what you want about fighting for your family's farm, whatever. Truth of the matter is, the Confederacy was built on the backbone of slavery and resisting, having that not necessarily taken away from them, but limited, have it limited to where they couldn't spread it even further to take advantage of it.
Well, first, to tie up that last point about Trump, yes, in principle, you should be willing to assess every action or statement by itself. But as you say, with him, it's a constant stream of garbage. So it is a little hard to separate, his regular actions from what he says and doesn't. You shouldn't wholly separate it, but yes, it is difficult. Even I find it rather difficult to not just react. I have to really stop and think about how bad any individual instance is. As far as the monuments that you were referring to, there's several reasons for that. The first you mentioned is this idea of, my family participated in that as part of my familial history. I don't accept that as a good argument, and we can talk more about that. But I think the second important issue that we need to talk about is this idea of culture. So, a lot of groups, African Americans, Hispanic people, I would say the LGBT community has developed quite a culture of their own. A lot of groups are very tied to an idea of like culture, and for Southern whites that are particularly attached to those monuments, they see the South as part of their culture. So symbols like those monuments, those war heroes, if you want to be so generous, the flag, the Confederate flag, I should say, all of that ties into their sense of culture. So it being threatened tends to be upsetting. I would argue that this is more of a general point, but I feel like a lot of us as groups are too deeply tied to a culture. And I think they're a good example. So for them, they'll always argue that it wasn't about racism, it wasn't about this, it wasn't about that, because either they don't know the history, they didn't understand it, or it just doesn't matter. For them, the Confederate flag was just something they saw waving around when they were kids. It's just the wider atmosphere of what it was like when they were growing up. I don't mean to stereotype, but the whole camouflage clothing, boots, mud shit, like. But you see those type of.
I know what you're saying.
Maybe you can. I live in Florida, so I see.
Yeah, I see it in Virginia, like parts of Virginia.
Like just that style of dress, even for people who aren't really out in the wilderness all that much or anything, it's just a lot of us self-identify with a culture, and for them, that is their culture, and because it's their culture, they're overly emotionally tied to it. I would argue that people in general shouldn't feel that self-identified with a culture, and if they were willing to let go of some of that, it would be easier to let this issue go. I didn't mean to go off on too much of a tangent with that. But.
No, I mean, but it's true. Like there are things, being an African American, about our culture that I have to not be so pro-black about, because there are things about our culture that aren't all that cool. Things in our history, our past, that I can't, be proud of, and stuff like that. I mean, I think every culture has that. And I think that's my biggest problem with the whole pushback. And I think this kind of deals with accountability too, is that you guys aren't acknowledging the fact that these things were symbols of a regime that did terrible things to people, and they were traitors to their country because they wanted to protect a very vile institution. Yes, I can understand you saying how it's about economics, but the economics were driven off of, the backs of slaves. Oh, this is about us protecting, our rights. You're protecting your right to own slaves. Slavery is not a moral, it's not a moral hill to stand on. Like you could word it however you want it, but that is what the base of the hill is built off of, slavery. And it's like, I think until a lot of people in the South, including in my birth state, Georgia, acknowledge that, we were some fucked up people back then. No, not all of us owned slaves. I get that, but the consensus was we fought a war to protect an institution that was really, really shitty. We treated people like livestock. We took them from their homes, their families, and changed their lives, abused them, all that. Like, acknowledge it. It goes back to what I was saying the other day about how it's just funny how now Germany seems to be like this beacon of light for democracy. Part of the reason that they seem that way is because they owned up to the fact that, you know what? We were fucked up. Nazism, even before that, imperialism. We tried to conquer people, subjugate people, our forefathers. And you know what? We're not going to celebrate that stuff. Don't show that stuff. Some people could say it's a little harsh to ban that stuff, but they want to cut ties with that history. They don't want that. They probably don't have to ban Nazi symbols and all of that, but I understand the sentiment, because it's like, we don't want that being the representation of, our culture. We don't want people to continue to look at it like, oh, and here's Germany. Yeah, they did good. They do good now, but remember back when they did that, they don't want that. They want to, force their own identity for the now. Whereas I feel like the South, by not being accountable for those things, they are forever tied in the past. And it's, I hate to say this, but it's part of the reason why they still get a lot of flack and a lot of you know, teasing, made fun of, and all that, because it seems like there's too many people stuck in that mentality that wants to honor a really bad past, you know. So that's why it seems probably why they're gonna continue to be a butt of a joke most of the time. Yeah.
And on that point about accountability, we modern people alive now, I feel like people don't understand this. We have a moral obligation to stand up for modern ethics. So, you know, I was having this conversation with my father the other day, excuse me, about essentially, you know, how do you judge something to be moral? And he was making this argument that, you know, what is moral depends on your culture or where you are in time. Some people might know that idea is moral relativism or cultural relativism. I don't agree with it. So let's take slavery, for example. I think part of the reason people are able to kind of distance themselves from that, especially in the South, is they'll say, well, you know, that's how it was at the time. Yes, but it was also wrong then too. Just because they didn't acknowledge it or didn't understand doesn't mean it wasn't a problem. So we can't completely excuse the sins of the past just because they were in the past. We have an obligation now that we understand how wrong it was to denounce that type of behavior, people in the South included. If you are can't think of the word. If you study the past and you want to, you know, keep a somewhat objective eye on it, then fine. But in general, it is okay and rational to say, you know what, that stuff was wrong. It always was wrong. It would be wrong now. You have to be able to denounce bad behavior regardless of when it happened. That might take a longer conversation. I know some people instinctively believe in moral relativism. I would put a strong argument against it, but maybe now isn't the time for that. In general, we now need to understand that we have an obligation to denounce that. If, you know, we're talking about the African American culture, there are things wrong with it. There is at the moment, a high level of violence, for example. We are obligated morally to denounce that. We can't justify it because it is part of a culture or an artifact of the past. It was always wrong. It would be wrong anywhere. And I think we need to understand that in order to be able to take accountability for that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So what would you say would be the best way for politicians to kind of change the culture? Because I think one of the things that people have issue with and why people don't like talking about politics is because when something big, like something really bad happens, people get really upset. They say, see, this is what all politicians do. This is all they're ever going to be doing. This is why I don't vote, which I hate that. Oh my God. I can talk an hour about why you're such a fucking idiot for not voting, but I'm going to let that go. Chill. But, you know, it makes people very disenfranchised with the whole process, and probably one of the bigger reasons why we're so disengaged as citizens in the political arena, because some politicians do some things and then they're not held accountable for it. And you kind of feel like, well, what's the point if I'm going to, you know, vote for certain things, like you know, certain morals or certain political agendas, yet they're going to go off and do God knows what. You know, what's the purpose of me even caring and things like that? What do you think politicians could do to kind of curb that attitude?
There's a lot we all could do, but as far as politicians go, I think one thing in a regular discourse is for them to start speaking more straightforwardly. With a lot of politicians, including, you know, I tend to be more progressive. I guess I didn't really give an account of my personal background or taste or anything, but I tend to be more progressive and whatnot. So in that arena, you'll hear names like Sanders, for example, Bernie Sanders, and just other people. But in general, a lot of them have a lot of difficulty being straightforward. Anytime they're asked a question, they'll waffle, they'll dance around it, or they'll start pumping up the crowd with this really charismatic talking, getting them all emotional and riled up without really addressing any of the issues. And I can definitely see why there's a lot of distaste for them, because even the popular politicians do it as well. It's not just a Trump tactic where he never answers any questions. I've seen it from guys like Sanders and other people. They are too interested in winning over the crowd and not really objectively addressing questions and giving true, direct answers. And it goes back to what I said about, leaving that little space open for accountability there with, we have to be aware that they're trying to reach and please their voters. And I understand that. But you are giving into the stereotype of what a politician is, which is somebody who can't answer a direct question ever. I think they need to get better about speaking plainly to the public, all across the board, not just Trump or Sanders or anything, just across the political spectrum. They're not good at directly answering questions, and they fear backlash. Fair enough, but that needs to change, because I listen to even people I like, and I just am not satisfied with any of their answers.
Yeah, I think also we need to be more accepting of honesty. I think one of the problems is a lot of times too is that we just want to hear what we want to hear. Tell me what I like, and I'm fine. But when you say something that we don't like, now we're against you. And yeah, Bernie is a good example, because me and you were talking about it the other day about how when he was running and how they asked him the question about what he's going to do if he became the nominee, because he's talked so much about not taking, celebrity money, special interest money, and all that. But a lot of funding that goes to the Democratic National Party comes from those areas, and that would be money that would be used to help his campaign when he ran, if he would have become the president nominee and help run his bid for election. And he tried to sidestep it as best he can, basically giving we'll see what happens if and when we get there type of answer that was not satisfactory. And like, for me, it would have been better if he would have just stated what he was going to do. Even if he knew he had to use, he could have said, "I'm not going to lie to myself. That money would help, with the campaign, and it would probably have to be used because we're fighting against somebody who has a lot of financial resources to draw on, and we want to make it as fair as possible. So, you know what? I'll just have to bite the bullet, swallow my pride, and apologize to you guys, but know that I'm not doing this because this is what I'm about. It's because it's a necessary evil right now to get to where we need to get." He would have said something like that, totally fine. Much respect. Because it's a real answer. At least for me, it's a real answer. We don't get that. And I think that's where, they get in trouble, and where we become frustrated, because it's like both sides don't want to. I guess it's the acceptance of reality that's hard for a lot of people. For them, it's hard to talk in terms of reality, because they feel like if we heard what they really, really thought, or how they really, really felt, then we would be, turned off, and it would cause problems and stuff like that. It's really, I honestly, this is why I would probably never, ever try to run for office ever, because I know me. I'm going to want to say, y'all are a bunch of dumbasses for doing this, something like that. And you can't say that, because you have to tiptoe, a line, and that's hard. It's hard enough to do that at your job. Like if you work customer service, I know how hard it would be for you to take shit from somebody working if you're working at McDonald's and some lady screaming at you about extra sauce on everything and you didn't put enough. It's like, trust me, I understand. It's hard. Yeah.
But you know, to your point, the reason I gave a little bit of allowance for that type of behavior is because, you know, as you alluded to, we as the average citizen, excuse me, are part of the problem. We react crazily to anything that doesn't sound like completely in line with what we want or our mindset. The reason they feel like feel the need to tiptoe around is because the average political scene is essentially a minefield. You have to tiptoe around. It's too easy to encourage extreme backlash from the public on relatively minor things. We are not good at hearing what we don't want to hear. And, you know, as another point, part of politics is being able to deal, I guess I should say, you know, you have one political party, you have another, they should be able to concede something so that they can get something else. But we don't tend to want to do that, at least not the regular public. We have this obsession, this like purity obsession where it's like, we need everything we want exactly, completely. There's no dealing, there's no back and forth, partially among the politicians, but partially just with the public. We don't seem to really believe in the idea that we should be able to work together. And maybe I don't get 100% of what I want. Maybe I only get like 80%. And I ceded that 20% to you to get that 80%. We need to be more okay with that sort of thing. And we're not. It's like an all or nothing game on both sides. And not just with politicians, but with the public in general. They don't want to hear that you're willing to cede anything to the other side at all. But that's kind of what politics is supposed to be. I don't know if you disagree with that point, but
No, it's a give and take thing. I mean, I know I can admit when I was younger and I got into like after I first voted and you know Clinton won. That was my first election, his first run for president, and I kind of did, you know, at the age of 18, 19, have that, you know, it's all about this side type thing. But as I started to get older and I would pay attention more, I realized, you know what, it's not just about what your side wants. You know, it's a give. Politics is a very give and take relationship. It is akin to marriage. You don't just go into marriage and, you know, okay, well, I'm the husband. I'm supposed to tell you what to do and you do things my way and then you obey. No, it don't work that way. You're a partnership. You work together, you know. That's how politics should be. And I think that's where it's become even more disenchanting because it seems more so than ever now they seem to want to split to the my side versus your side thing. And nobody seems to want to give at all. It's like now it's just all the, even within party. I mean, look at the Republicans. You know, you got the Republicans drawing a line in the sand against the Democrats, but within the Republican Party, you have the Tea Party drawing a line in the sand. You have the radical, you know, left drawing the line. The alt left, or I always forget which is left or which is right. They're all backwards. Yeah, alt right. You know, you have them in the party drawing the line against. It's like everybody wants to draw a line in the sand and fight each other. It's like, no, that's not how it's going to work. You need to state your position. I state mine. We figure out what's the best way that, you know, we can meld some type of middle ground out of our positions. That's the way it should always be. You should always try to push towards the middle ground and try to find a solution. You know, it may not be satisfactory to everybody at all times, but at least an acceptable solution.
I believe having a political system is the admission that we have many different viewpoints, and this is our way to try to, like you say, meld them together. But it feels like most people don't recognize that as the goal. It feels as though it's a team sport and you're out to win at all costs. And you're never going to get anywhere that way. And I'm not just saying that to be, flowery. I'm just saying that is the point of having a political system in general. If you're not doing that, then why have one?
Yeah, might as well just go back to what Trump wants, which is a dictatorship.
Yes. And you have to have a little faith that you can convince other people or reason with them in general. So, we've talked about Trump and the right. So in fairness, I can talk a little bit about the left. One of their biggest problems is, we talked a little bit about culture. They tend to clump together in these different groups. So you have women, African Americans, Hispanics, LGBT community, Muslim Americans, so on and so on. In each group, there is this notion that if you're not part of that group, you cannot at all understand or reason with them. If I'm talking to somebody who's not Black, it's like this assumption that because they're not Black, they can't on any level understand what I might be going through. I think we talked about this the other day. The example I use is I see some of my female friends when the issue of birth control, just birth rights in general, women's rights around that subject comes up. I've heard several times people say, if you don't have a vagina, you shouldn't get to make the decision or whatever, or there should only be women making that decision. Implicitly meaning that only women understand what it's like to go through that, so only they should be part of the decision-making process. To say that is to say that you don't think men could possibly understand reason, which is irrational. I agree with a lot of that stuff. I'm more progressive than a lot of people, so I'm perfectly fine with giving them rights to a lot of things. There's no reason to suggest that, clear admission, I was never a woman at any time. I'm not transgender. I've always had a penis. So my agreement with, giving women their rights is not based on me having prior experience as a woman. It's because I've listened to arguments from women. They sounded reasonable enough, and I could agree with them. We have to believe that, as fellow human beings, we can actually reason with each other and explain our viewpoints. I don't expect a random white person on the street to have had my same experience, but I expect him as a rational human being to be able to hear my arguments, consider them, and we can come to some kind of understanding. I can communicate what my experience has been like with him. He doesn't need to be a Black person. So that's why I'm perfectly fine having leaders who are women or white or whatever group, because we're all humans, and theoretically I should be able to reason with you using some of my experience, but you don't need to have that same experience. And that's more of a problem on the left than I see on the right, is this notion that if you're not part of a particular group, you cannot say much about it. To say that is to shut down conversation altogether.
Yeah, and I've always said that's one of the reasons why the Democratic Party has such a hard time. As being the progressive, supposed to be the more open-minded party, you have so many different groups who separate themselves because they feel like you said, one group can't understand what it is to be like the other is. Therefore, you can't argue for my rights or what's best for me more than I am, which that shouldn't be the attitude. It's not about being more capable. It should be more willing, in my opinion. If you're willing to help me, that's great because you're actually listening to me. And we can work together and we can fix things for not just me, but you too,
And, again, it goes back to the goal of politics. It should be for all of us to come together and rise up, not for every group to just air their grievances and fight each other. I like to listen to audiobooks, and I just finished one today. It was called Who Stole Feminism? It's by Christina Hoff Sommers. And during one of the parts, she was talking about, essentially this feminist group a couple decades ago that formed. And, the women in it started to cluster off into subgroups. Like you got the Black women, white women, lesbian women, and then even the lesbian group started to, cluster off into, say, Black lesbians and then Black lesbians with like white, spouses and stuff. It's one of the big problems on the left. They tend to cluster into smaller groups and then cannibalize each other.
Yeah.
Isolating each other down and then not growing at all. So that was just a bit of fairness, because I know with Trump being a representative of the right, we're probably going to talk about the right a lot. But
yeah, I know. But no, seriously, the left is pretty fucked up. Very, very fucked up. I mean, hell, look at again, going back to the whole accountability thing, the aftermath of the election, the fighting, the arguments about who went wrong, where, why did this not happen? Well, if this group would have threw its support behind Barry, then he could have won and he would have beat Trump, and guaranteed that the Democrats won. No, if Barry's people would have stopped, and not, although I am kind of a mind that some of the people who claim to be Barry Sanders supporters, y'all should have listened to Barry Sanders and stop this guy from becoming president. But it's just that it's that argument. It's like, who's responsible for this? It's your fault. No, it's your fault. When collectively speaking, it's just like everybody had a part in it, and they all collectively dropped the ball. But nobody wants to admit, well, yeah, if I probably would have did this and you probably would have did that, and we would have figured something out and came to a consensus, it would have been fine. No, it has to be this particular group. It's their fault. It's all your fault. I have no responsibility in this at all. And it's just sad. And they're still fighting today. I mean, you hear stuff about going forward, 2020, there's still some argument as to who should take the lead, which group should, and all that. And it's just really dumb.
I gotta go to show we don't talk to each other enough. I mean, I don't know about you, but I certainly realized after the election that maybe I wasn't paying enough attention to the, disenfranchised white group in the Midwest or whatever his large voter base was, because I was genuinely shocked at the amount of support he seemed to have. It made me realize maybe I was just locked up in my bubble or something. I did not see this upswell of support for him coming at all until it was too late, pretty much.
Yeah.
So I could definitely admit that maybe I wasn't doing a good enough job of being aware of all the different viewpoints going on in the country at the time, as I'm sure many of us weren't.
Yeah, that was oh my God, that was such a surreal night. I remember that night. it was weird. It's kind of crazy. It was as magical as the first time Obama won felt to a lot of us. That night was just the total polar opposite. It was just oh my God, what is happening? It was just this really. It was just so weird. I remember I even went to sleep and woke up and was is it seriously? What? This is fake.
I had the same feeling for hours that day. I think I wasn't able to stay up all the way till, it was really said and done, but it was at a point where it's pretty obvious what was going to happen. And then I woke up and I had to look online. I'm like, that didn't really happen. And I
went to sleep when he got Ohio. When he got Ohio, I was like, oh shit. So I went to sleep and I woke up right before they made the official announcement. But after he got Ohio, it was just something in me just said, he's going to win this.
Yeah, I admit, I was just wandering around the house. I woke up early as fuck, and then I wandered around just this out-of-body experience. I just can't believe. And even today, sometimes I'm I will see him on TV or something, or we'll hear these stories, and I'm like, when am I going to wake up? This isn't real. I can't have this cartoon character as a president of the free world. It still feels surreal at certain times when you get past, how numb you feel toward all the idiocy. Still have those moments, but
yeah, what was that? It was it's just a few weeks ago, there was this guy who was held, this Canadian guy. He was held by ISIS, and his family finally got him out. And when they got him out, he asked about what's been going on because, being locked in captivity, he didn't really know. So before they let him go, ISIS let him know. It's well, Trump's president of America. They were just telling him some of the current things that's gone on since he was in captivity. And he literally said when they told him that, he was like, you're lying to me. He's like, this isn't real. And it took, for him getting back and having several people tell him, no, look, it's right here in the newspapers and all that. Trump is president, to come to grip with the fact that that guy is president. That's sad. It's sad that this is the reaction people get. It's like, you guys pick, and this is a worldwide thing. That's the thing that makes it worse, because the whole world's looking at us and they're like, you guys pick who to lead y'all? It's a running joke. But we could have that discussion at another podcast, because, oh my God, it's so. But we have to be accountable. That is the key point. We have to be accountable. We put ourselves in this mess.
Do you remember? I think it was his inauguration when he said, essentially it wasn't raining when it was raining.
It was horrible. For those who don't know, I actually live in the DC area. I am 10 minutes away from the Capitol and the White House. And I could tell you, yes, it was a very dreary, shitty day. That day, it was not pleasant at all. The heavens wept on us because they knew.
And I'm pretty sure he said something like, God didn't let it rain on my little special day, where the fuck he said. But the reason I bring that up is because, we talk about accountability. I remember when he said that, I said to a friend, we have just elected a man as president who is capable of standing in the fucking rain and telling you it's not raining. Yeah. What are we going to tell our kids? Right, I don't have any kids, but I was thinking to myself, like, whenever in the future when they have the little history books and they have that wall of presidents, how am I going to explain to my kids
that you know what? I hope I'm alive and I have kids by that time. He's putting the history books. And I want to be there. Like, I actually want to sit in the history. I want them to tell me when they're going to talk about presidents. And I want to sit in there and see exactly how is a teacher going to, like, if you're a civics teacher, how do you explain this? I really want to see a civics teacher explain the Trump era.
I hope they do, because I brought it up because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to tell my kids that I was there and allowed that to happen.
Yeah,
it's a point of great embarrassment.
We elected a reality TV star as president. I mean, at this point, Kardashian in 2020. Just go ahead and just go all the way down the rabbit hole, people.
You brought up reality there, and since we're on the point of accountability, I want to hold the voters accountable for a bit of fact checking. So, I think I brought this up in conversation with some other time. I'm looking at some notes. We have issues like climate change, vaccination, general scientific shit. And I don't know how to explain it. There's this just intellectual laziness when it comes to fact checking anything. Sometimes with what Trump says, sometimes it's just general random shit. I look on Facebook and I don't see people like really thinking through their arguments and typing them out in their own words. I see essentially just memes being shared around thoughtlessly. On many occasions, I'll see somebody share an article and then I'll read it and I'd be like, clearly you didn't fucking read that article because it counters what your little argument is, or it'll be a meme that I can easily fact check and show is false because we have the power of Google. Like, we have a world of information at our fingertips and people are just intellectually fucking lazy. There's no accountability for making sure something is true before you actually go out and spread it. I see some memes go viral fast and it freaks me out because I can tell that it's false. A more lighthearted example, there was like this meme with like this girl, it was like a shot from Twitter or something where she made some joke about some, I don't know, fucking dude being white when he was like I remember it was like a racist kind of thing, right? And I saw a bunch of white people shaking around like, see, you can't even be white in the country anymore. And they were all freaking out. So, you know what? I went to this girl's Twitter, and it was very obvious that she was kidding. She even said it several times. It was a joke. You know, why is this thing being resurfaced again? It was a joke. She plainly said it wasn't serious. And, you know, let's just take her on the benefit of the doubt for now, because it was pretty stupid. Like, it was so stupid, I immediately thought it was a joke, which is why I went to her Twitter. I saw tons of hatred and vitriol for something that it took me literally less than a minute to falsify. And I see this all the time. People letting this information just go viral and flood everywhere without even trying to see if it was true or not, which is hurting our ability, you know, as a democracy to have objective facts. This is part of the public's problem, is that they're not trying hard enough to keep down the bullshit, I guess you could say. They are too willing to just share anything as long as it seems to fit in with their viewpoints. And again, it's something I see on both the right and the left. I see memes that share figures that are false and easily shown false, things with no studies to back them up, things with poor arguments, things that are just patent lies, things that are purposely, you know, crafted to piss people off. You know, people talk about that whole Russia messing with our election and, you know, introducing a bunch of bullshit, you know, into our system. We're allowing that because we're not trying hard enough to falsify anything. You know, if somebody goes to my Facebook, they'll see that there's a very small amount of, you know, me sharing articles or memes or anything. It's mostly because I haven't taken the time to really try to verify them. You know, I'm not quite as lazy as a lot of people are when they just share that type of shit. And that's something we need to get better on, is demanding truth and holding ourselves to a certain standard.
Definitely. But we don't, because once we get caught in it, it's just like, okay, don't just ignore it or attack. And then people will leave you alone.
Again, when, you know, we talked about people not, you know, talking to each other, being kind of isolated in, you know, the bubble they believe in. Part of the issue with all that shit going viral is that once it's gone viral, it's kind of too late, because you're not going to hear the counter argument because you're in that bubble. That's what's so scary about it, is that once you see a certain number of shares, it's like, oh shit, what now? Because you can't reach those fucking people who are sharing it anymore.
Yeah, it's like you said, the girl, she kept saying it was a joke, but, you know, people had already took it to a level where even her coming out and saying that just got lost in the whole conversation. It's just pretty damn sad.
When we have a president that doesn't believe in facts at all, you know, this isn't helping.
Yeah, no, and yeah, when the leader of, you know, your country is leading by example in that way, it just makes it harder to expect other people to fall in line and like try to do the right thing and all that. It's gonna, you know, if it's good for him, hey, why can't I do it? You know. I'm sad. I need more wine. So, any last thoughts on our topic of accountability?
I had the note about talking about being accountable to share some religious beliefs. I don't know if you want to touch on that or save it for another time.
No, we can go ahead and do that.
Okay, so
I've told just really quick, and I've told Cardiac this, and I tell everybody with any podcast I ever do. The people who I genuinely do podcasts with, we all seem to share a similar trait in which that we can go on for hours about something. So if you're expecting, like I said in the beginning when we were planning this, I want to generally do an hour. Yeah, we've passed an hour, which is fine, because that's just the way that we are when we have these conversations. We get very engaged in them, and these are the type of conversations that I hope you guys like, because, you know, these are the kind of conversations that we need to have. Yeah, people. We spend we spend hours and hours talking about what, you know, Cardi B wore to the BET Awards, but we don't talk about stuff like this. So I have no problem with it. Hopefully, you guys have no problem with it. But you said you wanted to talk about religion and accountability.
Well, religion is one aspect of it, but this idea of private beliefs. So religion, it just happens to be a very good example of it. There are certain ideas that people feel, it's just my private beliefs. It doesn't have anything to do with politics. I don't have to share this. You see it with politicians. You see it with the public in general. It's not true, especially with religion. So I've heard people a bunch of times say, my religion doesn't matter as far as my politics. So they feel no need to talk about their religion. There's two things you never talk about in America is politics and religion. And I don't agree with that, especially on the religious aspect, because your religion affects how you vote. So I've heard people, for example, who are religiously motivated wanting to vote for certain people, particularly on the right, because of the issues they have with things like abortion. Or, in previous years, issues we had with stem cell research and so on, issues with LGBT rights like gay marriage and whatnot. This notion that your religious beliefs are a private thing and you don't have to, argue for them or justify them or explain yourself when you have them, I personally think it's bullshit, because it assumes that your religious ideologies are completely separate from everybody else. My religion doesn't affect you, so I don't need to justify it. But it does affect me because it affects how you vote. I've seen people who were hesitant to vote for Hillary because they were concerned about her stance on abortion and wanted to vote for Trump. It affects how people vote and affects, other people's lives. It's hard for me to make that argument because, again, in America, you don't talk about religion and politics. Full disclosure, I'm an atheist. And it is not always a fun task to talk about religion in general. You get called all sorts of nasty names. Religion is it's unique in that it's very difficult to ever criticize it. There's just this unspoken rule that you don't criticize people's religion, which makes it nearly impossible to talk about. There's few other things that are like that. Maybe you could argue certain facets of feminism and race discussions are sort of like that, but religion is particularly unique in that it's nearly impossible to talk about.
See, I don't totally disagree. I understand what you're saying, but the flip side is that as difficult as we say it's to talk about, and again, the whole idea, because that's usually a truism of most jobs you don't talk about religion or politics, generally because you don't want to get in trouble and you don't want to piss somebody off. The problem with that is that it's not true, because while, I may not say anything to someone at work, I don't do this, but there are people who do. If they know that you're Jewish, they're going to have it's going to all of a sudden, and again, they won't admit to this, but they might not have fondness for Jewish people. So if they know that you're a Jewish person, they're going to treat you slightly less, less as friendly as they'll treat a fellow Christian. Or going back to the election, part of the reason why Bernie got flack and pushed back was because, hey, he's breaking tradition. This is a Jewish guy running for president. We have never had a non-Christian as president. Do you know that? Do you realize that? Every president has been of a Christian faith.
I was going to mention earlier, I wasn't saying it, but it's been said that you probably could not win a presidency as an atheist in this country.
I truly believe that you can't do it as anything but a Christian almost. Bernie is probably the closest that we've come to having a possibility of having a non. And that's the sad part, because he didn't even win his party. But he's probably the closest that you could say that we've come politically to having a non-Christian president.
To be a Jew.
But it's subtle things like that. It's like people will, and again, they won't be accountable and admit it. They will push back because, hey, doesn't go with tradition. You know, this is a country that's supposed to be about God and, you know, Jesus Christ and all of that. You know, we've insinuated so much of that into the fabric of what this country is supposed to be that it's hard. It's still for us to accept anybody else. It's like we don't talk about it. We don't say it. We don't bring it to light as much as we used to. But it's the same thing with the, you know, I would say until recent times, it was the same thing with Obama. One of the biggest problems with a lot of people were they were uncomfortable with the idea of an African American president. And they wouldn't say it because to say it would bring, you know, down, you know, criticism on you. But it's always been that underlying, and I always say this, and I love to say it around people because I know it makes them people I know it makes nervous, because a lot of the things that have been done, a lot of the policies that are being changed right now are being changed because Obama did it. And I always say, yeah, nobody liked that the black man did this. And people get uncomfortable when you say that, but you know, there's some truth to it. Because why is there such a big push why is it every time that something gets changed, like, I want to fix what Obama broke? It's never about we need to do this for the American people because it's what's best for the American people. What's the big thing that he always says? Like, well, Obama fucked this up, so I'm going to fix it, or I'm going to get rid of what Obama did. They make a point of pointing out that, you know, this guy did it. He did it. They don't really they've done it with other presidents, but not with such like fever. I mean, in my history, I can't think of anybody. I don't recall, you know, Bush Jr. coming in. It's like, now it's time to rectify everything the Clintons did to us. You know.
But what's the best you could say about it? To the extent that it isn't race, that means it's just pure party fervor there. For those who aren't motivated by race, they're just completely motivated by political identity, which is not a compliment.
Yeah, so, it's like, okay, so you're a step above being a total asshole, maybe, but you're still an asshole.
That's the most generous interpretation I could give you. If I'm not gonna call you a racist, I'm at least calling you politically biased. But
yeah,
which is not great. But yeah, I can see the argument about risking discrimination, especially in the workplace. But I think this is a social.
Yeah, like for me, I hold to that truism, not because I don't want to risk racism, because I will have that conversation with anybody. I would enjoy to have that conversation with anybody, as long as you're going to be a rational human being. You're going to be a rational human being. I'm going to probably say something that will end up causing an incident, because I'm going to really, really get sarcastic and fuck with you and try to make you feel as stupid as you sound. But I don't do it because I don't want to hear what a lot of people have to say, because they will do those things that will make me lose my job. And I just, you know, Jesus. And it's hard working in a DC area. It's so hard because this is the seat of politics. So it makes it worse.
And I was just thinking the other day, I saw one of my coworkers, you know, he had this like a shirt with like a Bible quote on it. And I saw another coworker with like a cross in her office. And I was thinking, you know, I don't think I've ever been comfortable to just say I'm an atheist in the workplace. So I've been saying it a little bit more frequently. I don't want to just say that we should be more comfortable and then not be comfortable myself. That's a little hypocritical. So I've been trying to, you know, I'm not shoving on people. I'm not like saying like, hey, let's talk about politics and religion all the time. But I'm at least willing to say it out loud where I wasn't before. And, you know, it goes to this whole silencing factor we have in the country. We're not willing to talk about this stuff at all. You hear people say, you know, not in school, not at work. And it's like, so where the fuck are you supposed to talk about it? At home? If you're religious, it's probably the same religion as your parents. As is the case with, you know, your political affiliation. It might be the same as your parents. Where else can you talk about it? Those are the places where you spend most of your life: school, work, home. And you've knocked out 2 of them already.
Yeah, I mean, we're not taking the responsibility that we make it hard for people to be different. in this country. This country has had a history of going against the grain, so to speak, so hard to do. Because it's not like you're doing it just to be a jerk. It's not like you just woke up one day and it was like, you know what? Most of the people in this country are Christian. I'm gonna fuck with them and just be an atheist, just fucking piss them off. You know what I mean? It's how you feel. It's what you believe. In this country, we have that right. People should respect that, but people don't want to respect it. But they don't want to talk about how disrespectful it is, because I'm sure, same situation with those people with the cross and the shirts at work. If they if they found out and they decided to come at you, I doubt anybody's going to stand up for you, because there's going to be, I won't say nobody, but it'll be very interesting to see if someone stand up for you, because even if you're not a Christian, hey, I believe in a certain God, and I'm not going to defend this person's right. I'm going to let him take this abuse. Even though as a human being, that's not the way it should be. It's going to be like, look, he may not agree with what I agree with, but he has a right to it. He's not bothering you. Why are you bothering him? Leave him the fuck alone.
I will say, even when I bring it up, nobody complains, but I can sense a small bit of discomfort that I don't sense when the religious people bring it up, what they think about. But again, I do believe, while I would admit I do see your point about certain risk. We need to get more comfortable talking about it, because this is part of the reason that we live in these, silos. I think I mentioned that little cousin who insulted me when we talked about this the other day. What upset me about that most of all was she must have been probably 16 years old. And it occurred to me that she had never had her religious ideas challenged before, because we're not allowed to talk about it anywhere except maybe at home. But my entire family is Christian, so nobody's going to disagree with her.
Right.
We are not allowing for opposing ideas to enter in and possibly change our mind, because we've made it distasteful to even talk about them in any arena where it might actually benefit us to hear some opposing ideas.
Yeah, it's
so you talked about what politicians could do to help improve the culture. We need to become more comfortable with talking about that type of thing. And I've had perfectly civil conversations with Christian people before. I remember on one of Abel's videos, I think I talked to this guy. Yeah, he was a Christian. I was talking about his beliefs and stuff. Like, we went back and forth for like 3 days in the comment section. Like, this idea that because I don't agree with you, I'm going to cut your face off isn't necessarily true. I mean,
yeah.
It's not as horrible as you think it might be to talk about some of this stuff. And again, you need to, because your beliefs will affect me indirectly.
Yeah. And I think what people don't seem to understand, and that's why, like, I can go back and forth with you, or I can go back and forth with Katina, or I can go back and forth with, Pride, because it's not like we're trying to necessarily convince one another that what we say is right. We're just trying to get each other to understand. And I think that's what people should, that's why people should do the back and forth thing more, because you just want somebody to understand where you're coming from, even if you never think I'm right, as long as you understand what I'm saying, I'm fine. I think that's what a lot of people would like. People don't just necessarily just do it just because they want to change your mind. They just want you to understand that, hey, I have a belief or point of view, and I just want you to be able to say, you know what, I understand, and acknowledge it, and not just dismiss me. Because when you dismiss the differences that we have in opinion, culture, race, what have you, that's where the trouble really starts to fester, because now you have someone sitting there thinking, well, wait a minute, you're ignoring me, you're treating me differently, you're treating me badly, all of this because I don't think or act the way that you do. That's not right. I wouldn't do that to you. Why are you doing this? So then that person is going to have those negative feelings, and it's just going to start fostering ideas. It's just like you hear a lot of atheists who get into arguments and who do pick fights. I can understand why you would, because you're being stepped on because you feel one way, it's like, well, you're gonna punch back. Eventually people start punching back. And you can't necessarily blame them all the time. You keep poking at them. You keep poking at people. What do you expect? You know what I mean? So it's just people just need to open up, their minds to like, you know what? There's different things, and even if I don't completely understand it, I at least want to understand what they're trying to say to me.
You might have your mind change. And this is something I think a lot of people, especially when I see online, don't believe can happen. I hear people say like, why bother talking about politics? You're never going to change my mind. Or why bother talking about religion or racism or this or that, whatever social issue like gun control. Why bother talking about it? You're never going to change my mind. You should not be proud to be so stubborn as to not be willing at all to change your mind. I've read and heard things that have changed my mind over the years. That's the whole benefit of hearing opposing opinions and really listening and trying to understand them. You might have your mind change. Public discourse should be a way for us to sharpen our thoughts. I am not claiming that I was born truly correct. Even that book that I just referenced earlier, Who Stole Feminism, gave me a lot to think about. I admit that it kind of attacked some thoughts I held several years ago. You have to acknowledge that maybe your mind can be changed, which a lot of people enter into a conversation assuming that they cannot be changed, which makes for yelling contests and waste of time. Seems like seems like a lot of people when they get online and start talking, it's like watching two rams. You always see that image of two rams butting heads against each other, but that's not what happens. They just kind of run past each other, not even noticing what happened. They're not even connecting at all.
And this is just a lot of time is wasted on people just not wanting to. It's sad. But okay. Now any idle thoughts. See, I told you tangents are gonna be happening all the time. I love tangents.
Technically I did have it in my notes, so thought I would bring it up, but I think we're good.
All right. So
are we at the 2-hour mark yet? Are we trying to push it?
We're actually pretty damn close to the 2-hour mark. I'm sure when I close this out, it's going to be about 1:45. So yeah. I always try to say a hard line, but I know it's going to take a certain amount. That's why I always prep myself for at least twice of what it is. Because again, like I said, I know me. I can ramble, and I know the people that I have these conversations with. This is how we talk all the time. I mean,
see that saying I never shut the fuck up.
Like me and you have had YouTube comment strings that have lasted weeks and stuff like so. It's just
I'm sorry for abusing you, by the way.
You were nice to me today. I was really expecting you to be a smart ass, and you were nice to me. I appreciate that, sir.
I get distracted when I'm thinking, I guess. So normally when I'm writing, I have more time to think about how to be an asshole.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I don't do good under pressure, man. You gotta learn.
Let's see. I need to talk to you online more often to cut the smart aleck shit. That way I don't have to deal with that anymore.
I mean, when I write things in the comment section, they're like book long, so I have plenty of time to think about it. So.
I know. And I'm like, Jesus, I gotta read this. And then I find like that one little string that is like, oh God, he's an asshole. Fuck you. Like always that one jab.
I mean, at least you read them. A lot of people, if it's not a meme, I don't want to read it.
I don't even want to see a meme. I hate that. You live your life by a meme philosophy. Seek help. Seriously. Like, because Simone is not like your spiritual guide, people. Please.
You can shut that shit up. She was psychic. Definitely a spiritual guide.
Okay. Okay, and we're gonna leave on that note. So, just really quick, we'll be doing this every Tuesday. You can see it pop up on the Wise Guy GSC site. It'll also be available on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play Music, and I always forget the third one. Stitcher. That's what. Although I may cut Stitcher, I just probably just do iTunes and Google Play Music and Podbean because those are the better. Those are usually the more popular sites right now. But you can catch the audio version of it if you don't want to watch the video version on one of those, so you can take it with you on the go and listen in. Thank you to everybody who listened. We appreciate it. This has been our first episode, so I think we did really well for a first episode. I've done first episodes of podcasts that have gone like pretty horrible. And this is definitely one of the cleaner ones that I've done. And just really quick, I appreciate you doing this with me. You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to come and sit with a crazy old man for 2 hours and listen to him rant and rave about things. And
I don't have a fucking life, you know. I don't have a fucking girlfriend. What the fuck am I supposed to do?
Well, I appreciate you not having a life, sir. You know, it is very appreciated. I'm glad you're on board.
If anybody comments on any of those mediums, I don't know if you said you put it on YouTube too, but
yes, it's on YouTube as well.
Try to check out the comment section, I guess. You can always harass me on Twitter @CardiacSuma.
Yeah, harass him like he harasses me. If you want to catch me, you can catch me on Twitter @Black BLAK_Magus MAGUS. I hang around the Wise Guy GSE Twitter account sometimes too, to fish out political stuff. You can catch me on YouTube as well. I have my own YouTube site, but most of the stuff that we're going to do is going to be on Wise Guy GSE, so check us out there. All right, so thank you again for listening. Cardiac, say bye to the people.
Bye. I don't have a catchphrase like this fucker, so I'm working on it.
You want me to say my catchphrase? I
assume so. I'm still working on what mine's gonna be.
I don't like saying this type of stuff, but I will just because in appreciation of you, I will say. All right, so with that, people, hit me up. Let me know what you think, and I'll holler at you later. It's your boy Black Magus, and we're out. Deuces.